quietly or there will be trouble.
Of course, machines can't think as people do. The machine is different.
Being, what marvelous being! How gratifying! How gratifying!
You know, for those of you who are movie buffs, you would know that in monster movies, up until this point of this movie, the scientist was always an elderly gentleman, or eventually became a younger one. If there was a woman in the movie, she was always maybe a love interest or something like that that helped with something, but never the scientist. This is the first movie where the woman plays a lead role and plays the major scientist in the whole film. So that's really how the history of women in science have come about as well. So prior to the mid-1800s, women were not allowed to get an education in science. They were not allowed to take classes at the university. And on the other hand, you find a lot of women who did science prior to that. So for example, the person that discovered oxygen, Lavoisier, it's primarily his wife's work in the lab that allowed for that discovery to happen. So women did science, but you only were allowed to do science if you were someone's sister, or if you were a wife, or if you were someone famous's daughter. But you also didn't get your name on any publication. So you would not see a woman's name on a publication anytime before the 1850s, for example. So at that point in the 1800s, we finally are allowed to get a little bit of education. So sometimes a woman is allowed to go to a few lectures. And eventually, they're allowed to earn a degree. And so the first female doctor is Elizabeth Blackwell, and she earned that degree in 1849. And then we have a couple of women that, as a chemist, I'm particularly fond of, because there are two elements on the periodic table named after women, and you can probably name one of them. Who's that? Anybody know? Yeah, I heard it. Madame Curie. So curium is named after Madame Curie. Madame Curie actually is the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes, one in chemistry and one in physics. She is one of 3 people that have ever won 2 Nobel Prizes. So the other person is Lisa Meitner. There's an element called meitnerium in the periodic table. And Lisa Meitner is a German physicist, and she played a major role in the discovery of nuclear fission. She was forced to leave Berlin in 1938 because of the war, but she played a major role there. And as a matter of fact, if you go to Berlin, you can drive down Lisa Meitner Strasse. So, and I've been on that street. In the early 1900s, we had Emmy Noether, who revolutionized abstract algebra in the early 1900s. So it's not until the 1900s that you see that women are allowed to be educated. Prior to that, the only reason that women were to be educated were to train their sons. Otherwise, women didn't need to be educated. So I want to tell you about a couple of women who have ties to Missouri, because I think it's important to also kind of hear their stories. They're both Nobel Prize winners. The first one is Gerty Corey. Gerty Corey started out her career with her husband, which is one of the ways, once again, that you got into this. She was born in 1896. She was born in Czechoslovakia, but came to the U.S. and became a U.S. citizen and won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. She and her husband discovered essentially how glucose is metabolized in the body, and so has a lot to do with how we've come up with figuring out how diabetes happens and what kinds of drugs can work for that. When her husband had a position at an institute in New York to start out with, and that's where they did their research. The institute really didn't want Gerty to be there because they thought that she would mess up all the lab things, and they didn't want her to be part of his work, and yet she was very integral to his success and to the discoveries. And she, as a matter of fact, it's her name that's on the Nobel Prize. So they leave New York, and every university they go to, even after they get the Nobel Prize, he gets a job offer, she does not. And they end up at Wash U in St. Louis. She still doesn't get a faculty position. She does get a scientist position there, but not a faculty position. They would not give her the faculty position until after she'd been inducted into the National Academy of Sciences. And then, so for the last 2 years of her life, she had a faculty position at Wash U. So, you know, it's just tough. At that time period, it was really tough. So the other person is Barbara Mcclintock. She was born in 1902, did a lot of work with genetics. So we think of genetic engineering now. She was doing genetic engineering before we started doing it some of the ways we do it now. So she did a lot with corn. She was very, very instrumental in figuring out a lot of genetics as it related to agriculture and growing better corn and those kinds of things. Her first position was at Mizzou, and they weren't inclined to give her tenure. As a matter of fact, she was making $3,000 a year in her faculty position. She was an assistant professor there. She decided that when she heard that they were not going to give her tenure, that they were not going to support her anymore, she went out east and did finish her research there and ended up winning the Nobel Prize. So very, very good and strong women who played a part, at least, in Missouri. So where are we at now? In chemistry and biology, 50% of the students at Missouri State University are women. And 50% of the graduates. They do a great job. And it's pretty open, and not that it's not open in other areas. The next two best where we have decent percentages of women would be in math and in geology. The places where we still struggle are computer science and engineering and physics. Those are the toughest, although I will tell you that right now the three very best students that I have in physics are women. We just, 2 years ago, we had a woman student who spent a whole summer working on the super collider in Switzerland. So that's just amazing. And she's going on to do all kinds of wonderful things. So all of it is certainly possible. The climate out there right now is good. So at Missouri State, we just hired two women physicists in the last 2 years. We've hired two new biologists who are women, and what else? Well, I'm trying to remember what the other hire was. 2 physics and 1 in chemistry. And an engineer. So we're trying to build up the role models there. And I think it's just important for young people to see those role models. For the last 25 years, we've been doing a program called Expanding Your Horizons at Missouri State, where we bring in middle school girls, and they get to do science all day long and find out, number one, that it's fun. I think it's fun. And then, but also to get their hands dirty and to find out what it's okay to do. We find that at least if the girls are in an environment where They don't have to worry about squealing and things like that. They'll play with snakes, and it doesn't bother them. They'll get their hands dirty, and they'll play with goop or whatever else we might have around. And then it's fun. And so they just need to build up a little bit of confidence. The literature also tells us that women, if they get a C grade, they'll be harder on themselves and they'll quit. Men will keep going. And so it's also really important, and I was just in the residence halls with our living learning community STEM students last night, telling them if they ever got a C and they needed pep talk, they have to come to my office. Because I'll give them that pep talk and help them keep going, because they get frustrated. Women get too hard on ourselves. We tend to be perfectionists. We like to make sure we get it totally right, and so it's really important that we kind of keep going with that and figure out ways to mentor one another and help each other. So right now there are lots of possibilities for women. The climate is much better. It's still not perfect. And especially if you read in the newspapers, I think the biggest complaints lately have been at some of the computer science firms, and looking at Google and Microsoft and some of those. And I know things will get better, but we have to be out there and we have to be doing it. So I thought I would open it up to see if there were questions from anyone or anything else that you might be interested in. Because we just saw a pretty amazing woman scientist who fought her way. I'm not sure I'm that kind of a fighter. I like to work in the lab, and I got interested in science because my mother is a nurse. My dad was the leader of the Boy Scout troop, and I got to go on all the Boy Scout campouts because I have 2 younger brothers, and they didn't know what else to do with me. So I watched them dissect the frogs and you know, everything else that the Boy Scouts do, and I was in Girl Scouts as well, but my dad, when we went fishing and hunting, it was always a lesson in either, you know, what to eat or how to gut that squirrel or whatever else it was. I didn't know that people really ate turkeys for Thanksgiving because there weren't turkeys in Northeast Iowa where I grew up, and so we didn't have any turkeys, but we would eat whatever Dad shot that morning. and so that's, you know, so that's what I grew up with. So when I went to college, I really wanted to know more about science. My initial goal was to be a doctor, but I fell in love with chemistry because I really wanted to know, how do drugs work, the good ones. So, for example, why does aspirin, I mean, this simple chemical of aspirin, how does it reduce fever? How does it take away pain? How does that work? And how does any drug do that in our complex body systems? How does that happen? And so I've spent my career making new drugs and trying to figure out how to make drugs better. And it's fascinating, and I still get excited about going into the lab. So, you know, that's a little bit about me. But it's also, it's just fun. It's fun to solve problems. So that's why I do what I do. So, questions? Yes?
Well, I'm kind of curious, does the university get the children involved? When I was in California, I belonged to in middle school. I have a teacher, biology. I love science. I was raised like you. My family are either you're a medical doctor or you're an engineer.
Yes.
Whatever. So I was basically pushed into science classes, biology, life science, my favorite time. But it stopped. I think there was a time where the teacher, they have a special curriculum where they take you to field trip. And then later on, the school system stopped that program, you know. And I was wondering, here in Springfield, the school district, do you, as the university level, do this particular program where middle school, you know, that the age where the curiosity, you know?
We do the program for the middle school, and then also the Phelps School for the Gifted is very close to the Missouri State campus. And so those students will come to campus frequently because it's a field trip where they don't have to bus them. But buses are expensive, and we see public schools taking fewer and fewer field trips because it costs. And that expense is tough. But you're right, it's important for us to get students out and about. And Missouri State has a field station, and so we take our students, but we also have a number of high school programs and middle school programs where we take them out to the field station, and it's right on Bull Shoals Lake, and they can experience the outdoors there as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to, and it's important, but Springfield offers that. With the Discovery Center that we have here locally, Missouri State also has an observatory that's just north of town, so you can see the stars. We've got a 16-inch telescope out there, so it's possible to do a number of things out there as well. Yeah.
I was just wondering how you persevered in a field with so many men, and especially as a dean now and a woman in such a prestigious role that you have at the university. What made you keep driving to make others take notice of what your qualities would be in that position?
I mean, I think I have a big passion to share what I know. So I absolutely love teaching. I absolutely love trying to get the light bulbs to go off with a group of students when I'm teaching, and to watch them succeed and go on and do wonderful things keeps me going. I think it's what keeps almost every faculty member going, or any teacher going, is watching your students be successful. And so that was my first thing. As I became a department head and a dean, now I get to watch faculty grow and do that for other students. You just kind of, you get to broaden that out, and I get to help watch faculty succeed and do the things, you know, maybe that I'm not doing right now, although I get to teach in the fall, so I'm very excited about that. But you get to help spread it, and so starting new faculty up, I'm not going to be here forever, and allowing that to happen so that that knowledge keeps getting spread from generation to generation. So that, I mean, those are the things that keep me going. And then it's just fun. It's just fun.
Did you have a mentor, perhaps, or somebody that pushed you?
Probably, my biggest mentor was probably my PhD advisor, but that happened to be a man, and some of the mentoring was a negative mentoring. So, for example, I remember he sat down with me when I got the job here, and it was at Missouri State, got the job 30 years ago. He sat down with me and he said, okay, here's some do's and don'ts. And one of them was, do not have a baby before you get tenure. I was married at the time. He said, do not have a child before you get tenure. Well, you know, the timing was such that I thought, well, that's kind of crazy. But so I didn't follow that. I had one child before I got tenure and one child after I had tenure, and that worked out. But, you know, so some of it was a negative mentoring, some of it was very positive. He was the best teacher in the whole world. I still cannot draw structures, chemical structures on the board as nicely and as beautifully as that man can. He was amazing, and I will never be able to do that, but I always aspired to do some of that. So I think he brought out the teacher in me. But lots of good mentors, yeah.
Speaking of the movie, have you seen the movie Marshall?
The Martian?
Martian.
No, I have not, but I vowed to read the book before I watch the movie. So I'm and the book is laying on my nightstand, and I just haven't gotten to it.
I took my niece, my godchild there because the lead was a woman. Mm-hmm. Finally, they have a woman casting as the captain or the major of this whole, you know, the story. It was just, so it's kind of nice they have written that. So I told her that, you know, as a child, as a daughter or granddaughter,
Yeah, having the role models out there is really important. It's really important to have the role models out there. Yeah, yep. Yeah. Well, all of you, I hope you'll encourage someone. Number one, go to the next set of movies because they're going to be awesome. And there are more discussions to happen. But also, if you've got a niece or a daughter or a granddaughter or a sister or someone that has an interest in science and math, yeah, encourage them. You brought one. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Keep encouraging and stick with it. Don't get discouraged. Find something you have that you love and that you're passionate about, and you'll keep going because there are so many problems to solve. We're not even close to being done. So there's a project out there, no matter what field that you happen to be interested in. So which field are you most interested in?
Mathematics.
Mathematics. Awesome. Awesome. Excellent. Excellent. Well, there are lots of problems to solve there too. So lots of good things to happen. So thanks for, yeah, another one?
How are the goals for CNAS doing for recruiting women? What is the percentage, perhaps, with the faculty?
Well, so I mentioned some of the statistics with students. With faculty, it's a little bit tougher. So you will see from the National Science Foundation, they call it a leaky pipeline. So even though 50% of the students who are in undergraduate programs in, say, biology and chemistry are women, by the time you get to a master's program, it's usually a little bit less than 50%, although ours is pretty close to 50. But then a PhD program, it'll be more like 30%, and then actually finishing it might be a little bit less. And then of that percentage that finish the PhD, a smaller percentage will want to go into academics. And so we do leak. I don't know, I mean, there are lots of reasons for the leaking, and I don't know that we've figured out all of them, nor can we solve all of them. So you don't see 50% of the faculty at Missouri State in the sciences being women. We're close to that in engineering and computer science, which is actually a good place to be with those two because they don't attract as many women at the undergraduate level. Biology and chemistry. Biology we don't do too bad. Chemistry has not, we need to hire a few more there. Physics we just hired 2 new ones. And mathematics is not too bad, but it's not great. And I need to do some hiring there and boost that up. So, so part of it is just sometimes women don't want to keep going, kind of thing. And there are probably lots of reasons for that, including family. Yeah.
Do we have enough sustainable type jobs for them to stay in this area, or are they, once they graduate with either their master's or their doctorate, do they just go away? Or are we able to sustain them here in this area? We have a number of good positions here in this area, but we do not have the kind of industry that will support a lot of PhD scientists in the area. It's growing with the Jordan Valley Innovation Center and some of the companies that are down there. That is growing, but we don't have the base here that would allow for significant numbers to stay here. On the other hand, a number of them will go away for a while and then come back and get some experiences at some other companies. Certainly if they want to go on for a PhD in one of the science disciplines, they've got to go away someplace. And that's actually probably a good thing, to get them away from here and having another experience, another life experience that allows them to either come back or to, expand their opportunities that are out there. Lots of good positions, though, in the state. The state has some great companies to work for.
Yeah.
Does this university sponsor international PhD candidate from, like, in Europe or other country?
Missouri State does not have any PhD programs. I mean, we've got some professional doctorate programs, but we do not have a PhD program in any of the sciences. Mizzou has, and the whole University of Missouri system has. Otherwise, you go out of state. Yeah. Or WashU in St. Louis. There are lots and lots of good schools out there. And the good thing about science and math is if you go on to graduate school in science and math, they will pay you a stipend to go to school, and they will waive your tuition, and you will not have to take out a student loan if you go, once you get into a doctoral program. Okay? I can't guarantee it at the undergraduate level. That just happens, you got to save your pennies and make that work. But once you get into a doctoral program in science and math, they will pay you to do that doctoral program. And that's a huge advantage over going to, it's not why I chose that versus medical school, but it was a really nice perk. And not everybody knows that. So it's important to know that that's available out there. I just helped a young lady who just got accepted to Notre Dame, and she's going to get a PhD in chemistry from Notre Dame, and everything will be paid for. And she'll have living expenses. I mean, she will not have to take out a loan. So that is awesome. Now, she'll have to teach and do research. So, I mean, she'll be working hard, but she'll also earn her PhD, and that's just amazing. That is just amazing. So, anything else? Well, thank you for watching the movie, and thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed the movie. Was it first time, or had you seen it a million times before?
When it first came out.
Yeah, when it first came out, yeah.
I think I had to shut my eyes a few times.
I actually pre-watched it a week ago in the daylight, so that, yeah. Because I hadn't seen it. Thank you so much for being here.